Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source.
Hello and welcome. I'm Amanda Farmer and I have with me today Reena Van Aalst from Strata Central. How you doing, Reena?
Happy New Year, Amanda.
Happy New Year to you. Our first chat for 2025. It's great to be back. Hope you had a fantastic break. Not too much waiting for you when you got back.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot that happened before we left. Unfortunately, we had some residents that had to be vacated in December when we were still at work, so that took a lot of time both on the day and then during the break.
Wow, they had to be evacuated from the building?
Yeah, well, they had to move out of their apartments, yes, because of something I really can't talk about at the moment because it would actually identify the building. It's something that's but these people, unfortunately, were told on Friday the 20th of December that they had to leave their apartments and not come back until we told them. And so therefore you can imagine trying to find accommodation at such short notice at that Christmas period in Sydney. So, that obviously would have that continued during the break in terms of people contacting us, which is fine. Obviously, we're happy to help people when it's needed. And, so it was still a good break, but unfortunately I just sort of felt really sad for those people because, for Christmas, especially if you had things that you had organised for Christmas Day, which a lot of people, may have had people coming over and things like that. Those plans had to be quickly amended.
It always happens at Christmas, doesn't it? In my building, we had a hot water heater go out, I think, a couple of days before Christmas, and we were a bit worried there wasn't going to be any hot water. Luckily, it was okay, and we were able to get that repaired pretty quickly, once again, with help from our Strata manager. So, just that time of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's good to be back, and we shall not be escaping our challenges or hopefully our wins in 2025. So lead the way, Reena. What's been challenging you already?
Yeah, I actually received an email from one of my colleagues, Strata managing agent, who I've known for many years, and we actually used to work together. And she wanted me to bring this to the attention of the podcast, I suppose in a way just to perhaps show people that as Strata managing agents, we deal with the public in general, which we obviously do in any customer service type function where you're dealing with the public. But I think sometimes people forget the sort of vitriol and how Strata managers are being treated. And sometimes, people can be unhappy about anything in life. You can say you're not happy with the cleaning, with the standard, whatever it is that you're not happy with, the conduct of someone, the performance of someone. But I think when people start to put such things in writing, and I think this is why she asked me to sort of talk about it, there was an email that she was copied in between the cleaner that this owners corporation was terminating, and she just mentioned to them, just to let you know that we're no longer your managing agent, please copy your new Strata manager. So which, of course, is the right thing to say. You want to make sure that they're using the right email addresses. And sometimes people obviously may be using an old thread, and they forget to add the new person in, which is all fine. So all she said was to her, just making sure that she said, you've incorrectly included me, please add your new Strata managing agent. And then the owner responded to say, it was a flick of a wrist, there's so many of you with that particular name out there. And then she said, and I'll actually read out what she said, do you think I care about the likes of you? You are a persona non grata, an old memory. Growing up, you silly prima donna. Ashamed of myself, never. Do you realise the non-importance of your role in society?
Oh, my God.
It's classified along with used car salesmen and real estate agents. Don't get above your station in life.
Ew.
And exactly. Now, it's just one of those things where sometimes people do think of Strata managers in that way, that we are sort of down the bottom of I wouldn't put real estate agents and used car salesmen in terms of trying to say what society thinks of those. But, obviously, if you look at the studies that are done about different professions, people that don't charge or are seen to be in more caring type roles like doctors and nurses are usually at the highest scale. And
in terms of trustworthiness, yeah.
And also perception. If you go to a dinner party and you say you're a doctor or something like that, people will look at you differently than if you say you're a Strata manager.
Yes.
So whereas in terms of people that charge or people that are seen to be perhaps acting in certain ways. Certain professions do have certain reputations because of the way that certain people conduct themselves, and that's, society. For sort of to say to someone, your role, basically you're a nothing in society, irrespective of what you think of that person, is just, and I just wanted to bring this to the forefront, and I suppose it's not a really great way to start 2025 in terms of our challenges, but I think with the last year with strata management getting a lot of focus and negative attention, we are noticing, I think, a lot of burnout and people in strata sort of getting more pressure put on them when people are being sort of tarnished with the same brush. And I just thought I'd perhaps bring it out there to people that, you may not like your strata manager, you may not like your cleaner, whoever it is you may not like, but I don't think anyone deserves to be written to in that way and spoken to in that way. And I think that sometimes people forget that, there's that saying that the customer's always right, and definitely the customer is not always right, because the customer comes from many walks of life, may have mental health issues, may have many different issues in their life, and sometimes people feel that they can espouse these emotions or their thoughts on people because they think of them as being lower in their mindset, as opposed to someone else where they would never speak to someone else in that way that they would speak to, say, a strata managing agent. And I think that as a profession, we do need to be respected, even though we don't have to be liked. But I think respect is the minimum that we should be able to expect from our committees and owners.
For sure. This is not the first time that I've heard about such communications, and I've seen some managers that have posted these things on LinkedIn or on Facebook. It's not necessarily something that I'm advocating, but that's pretty bad, the one that you've just read out. And where is the voice for strata managers in response to this type of communication? I mean, you've said at the top there, Reena, that your colleague asked you to bring this to the podcast because that person obviously knows that we have a large audience, owners and managers are listening, and they want people to be aware that this is the kind of communication that you are subject to. I mean, there's an industry association out there that is supposed to be representing strata managers. Do they know about this? I say tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, they do have a thing called respect or something like that. They do have some wording about
and what
respect.
Advocacy or campaigning or communicating is happening to owners to say this is not on? I mean, there's got to be some kind of big advertising campaign, like we sometimes see our state governments do on television when it comes to road safety and things like that. And post-COVID, how to treat people properly, even though you might be frustrated. Surely we've got to ramp it up. Those in charge, quotation marks, in charge, have got to ramp it up. It's not getting better.
No.
In fact,
unfortunately,
it's getting worse.
Yeah, and it is actually getting worse. And I think because of the fact that some of the members of that body that we're talking about were implicated in all the negative attention that strata managers get, I think that now there's been a loss of faith in terms of those people out there that would look to that organisation as being the right advocate, because if you're part of the reason that, that's not the organisation itself, but if members of that organisation that were in senior positions are responsible for the negative attention that strata managers received and continue to receive. Even yesterday I was asked the same question about, what was the fallout? I had someone come to me and asked me as a prospective client what was the fallout from these recent events that were in the media. And I'm sure, because I'm sure you've watched it, so everyone's watched it. Yeah, so it's still now resonating with people. It really hasn't gone away. When people are looking at a new agent or even their existing agent, they're now being more, and obviously there's now changes to the Act which require more disclosure. But I think this is now, again, put such a dampener on the profession of strata management. And I think that I think something does have to change for people to continue to stay in the industry, because I think there's a lot of burnout that's been spoken about by many people in terms of, I've already had 2 meetings this year, and one of them started at 6 and finished at 9:25. I mean, really, like it. And they're nice people, and an hour and a bit was taken more than on one thing, because there was a new committee and the changing strategy that had been adopted by the previous committee. And it's not, people are friendly, they're a great committee. I've worked with them since 6 years now or 7 years. But it's one of those things where, like, you get home at 9:45 or 10 o'clock. It's just not feasible for people to work these hours and even if you had a very small portfolio, which I think is also being advocated by people, it's still like to do this once or twice a week, even if you're doing not that long, but it's still contributing to burnout by strata managers as well.
Yeah. Well, in New South Wales, at least, I think we're uniquely placed with the brand new board for SCA New South Wales to have a fresh look at this, to recognise that things are not getting better from the perspective of owners. And from my point of view, that's a sales and marketing conversation that strata managers, most efficiently through their representative body, need to be having with owners. I mean, we can look to the owner representative groups, say the OCN, and say, look, what can you do to try and rein in this behaviour, to educate, perhaps to better inform? But when I think about those owners who are members of the OCN, I don't think they're the ones who are sending these emails, right?
No.
Those who are members of the OCN, who are members of my community, those are our engaged, already more informed, already more educated owners who are less likely, I'm not going to say they don't, but less likely to communicate in that fashion. So, yeah, look, it's an issue that I do hope those with the power to implement change have on their radar, top of their list for 2025. Thanks for sharing that, Reena, and thanks to your colleague for sharing that with you. My challenge for this week, rather different, relates to compulsory managers, strata managers who have been appointed by the Tribunal to bring a dysfunctional community back on track. They very often hold all powers of the Owners Corporation, all powers of the Strata Committee for a period of time, up to 2 years in New South Wales. I had a conversation with a colleague late last year, and it was brought to my attention that some compulsory managers are particularly bad at record keeping. And this doesn't come as a surprise when you think about the power that a compulsory manager has to make all decisions, including to raise levies, to make decisions about repair and maintenance, to create bylaws, all without the need for meetings, without the need for any instructions, without the need to consult with any owners. You can kind of understand how there may be a failure to keep records or a forgetting of the importance of keeping records. And I've certainly been involved in cases where a compulsory manager has been replaced with another compulsory manager because of their not just failure to keep records, but inability to comply with the legislation, with poor record keeping being a key component of that. Now, I wanted to share this with you, Reena, because I think this is probably going to resonate with a lot of our audience who have been subject to these compulsory appointments, don't understand what's going on in the building. Compulsory manager says, well, I don't have to consult with you. I don't have to have a meeting. I'm not going to do it. These things are just going to happen. You're just going to get a levy notice. There'll be a special levy. You just have to pay it. Not up to you to know what it's for or why. I know that you, Reena, do a lot of compulsory appointments and are often in that rare position where you are then appointed as the voluntary or agreed manager once your compulsory appointment is up. So that tells me that, you know, you're doing something right with your compulsory appointments. And I think record keeping, from what I've seen where I've been involved, where you've been a compulsory manager, I think record keeping is a real focus for you in that role. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically what I try and do is keep all the owners up to date in terms of what's happening. So I've got one at the moment that's on the Central Coast, and basically, you know, water penetration, water ingress, not addressed for many years. And so every time I get a communication from the engineer, I forward it to all the owners. And obviously what's happened in this particular building, because of this happening, other owners are coming forward and saying, well, I've got the same problem. So now we're sort of trying to include all of them. And the owner who was responsible for having Strata Central appointed said, but, you know, what about me? I said, no, but I am doing you, but my functions are to look after everybody. So I can't just exclude everybody just for you. So basically, you know, that was the orders, but I have the functions of all of the Owners Corporation in full. So I have to also address all the other things. So, and I always have meetings with people. For levies, for everything. I have an AGM. I'm having an AGM coming up on Friday for a building where we've had to raise a lot of money and borrow a lot of money. To get a compulsory order is not easy. So I think that's number one. So I think people have to understand that if your building is compulsory managed, there is enough evidence, you know, because these orders aren't made lightly. So the building has to look at itself, number one, and sort of why are we in this position? Number two, I think a compulsory manager needs to hold meetings and issue agendas as if it was a normal manager. Now, I'm not concerned about the statutory timeframes for those. Like, I haven't given 14 clear days for an AGM. I've given, I think, 10 because I want to hold the AGM and I want to raise, but at the end of the day,
I just want to address the legality of that point, because that is exactly the subject that my colleague was talking to me about last year. Do compulsory managers need to be holding meetings? And the short answer to that is no. And we have Court of Appeal authority in New South Wales, a case called Andrews from 2009, which I'll link to in the notes, that makes that clear. The compulsory manager can make decisions, doesn't have to have meetings. But you're saying, Reena, you do that anyway. And because you don't legally have to do it, you're not too worried about the strict compliance, but you're just being reasonable in putting that agenda notice together, giving everyone a reasonable amount of notice, serving them at their address for service.
Yes.
And what are you actually then doing in the meeting? People turn up or?
Yeah, people turn up, And so basically, like, I have them as being in attendance. And for example, if there's a bylaw, we will put that on there, because if all the owners are against it, then I'm not going to approve it. So in the day, I do try and take heed of the wishes of the owners, where the owners should have a choice. I mean, we have another one where an owner wants to convert a commercial onto a residential lot. Now, that I can approve that, but I'm not. We sent the email to all the owners saying, give us your feedback, because I don't want the owner to go to all this cost of getting all these reports done for council, et cetera, if the majority of the owners are against it. And we gave people 14 days to give their thoughts. And we only having 2 people that objected to it, I think it was. So I thought, well, that's not really enough out of this many owners. So therefore, that proposal will be supported. And again, I'll have a formal meeting when the time comes, as in, like, invite all the owners. I try and have the meetings at lunchtime rather than evening, because with my meeting schedule, so at least lunchtime people can join on their lunch breaks if they can't come in the evening. So I do try and make it as easy as possible for people to have a voice. And we send out all the reports. So what I'm finding, I think, with compulsory is that you can tell people more things than you would as a normal manager, because the committee a lot of the time want to control what people know about. So, for example, a lot of reports I'm not allowed to send out to all the owners, because the committee doesn't want me to do that. They don't want to allow. So as a compulsory manager, every time a report comes in, say the tender document for the lifts, well, normally that doesn't get sent out to all the owners, but I sent it out. When the tender results come in, I'll send it out. So normally that would only happen once a general meeting is being held to raise the money for the thing. It wouldn't be sent out in the meantime. So the owners would get the agenda for the general meeting to raise money for a new lift, and then they would get the tender report. But they would never get it beforehand, whereas I can send all that stuff out as I get it.
Yeah, so there's even more transparency under at least your compulsory appointment, and it's easier. It's such a good point. I am so often telling clients who are coming to me saying they're frustrated with their strata manager because he or she won't respond to my communications, he or she won't send me this document or that document. And I'm saying, please understand that your strata manager takes instructions from the committee. And not always, but often what you will find is the committee is telling the strata manager, don't send that document.
That's right.
Don't communicate with that person. The strata manager is taking those instructions. And it's very hard. You're in a really difficult position then as a strata manager, because they may think you're being rude or you're breaching the law or whatever it is. But it's the committee. And it is this lack of transparency that I'm always banging on about at committee level that is frustrating owners, that is confusing them, that is making them imagine all of these terrible things are happening in their building when they're not. Committee's just getting on with the job along with the strata manager, but forgetting to tell people about it.
Yeah. But sometimes in some buildings, and you may obviously be aware of this with your experience within your own building and acting for other clients, is that sometimes if you give people too much information, it can cause problems, because I've had people where they go ring the consultant and they try and, and we could tell them something, no, don't communicate with that person. You've got to come through us. It's not like that person can't tell you what to do. So sometimes in some cases where there's friction in buildings or there's something happening, it can be counterproductive. But on the whole, in most cases, I would say, as you get something, issue it, or put it on the portal or whatever, so people can go there and have a look at it. So, and so I find actually managing compulsories in that way much, much easier, not because I've got the power as such, which I do, but it's more about having the ability to communicate with people at the level and timing that I think is appropriate, and not what someone tells me is appropriate, which sometimes is and sometimes isn't. So,
and it's so important for your role, as you said, you're acting for the owners corporation. You essentially are the owners corporation in many cases, but you have been appointed on the recommendation often of one owner. So
Correct.
the applicant for the compulsory appointment has proposed you, and there very often is, a perception that you are then in that owner's camp. And that perception can come from the owner themselves, who then, as you said, says, well, hang on, what about my place? I'm the one who got you appointed. Why aren't we doing mine first? And the perception from other owners that you're in the pocket of this applicant. So to be fully transparent, to be including everyone in the discussions, to be holding these meetings, to be sending out the documents is protecting your position there as that impartial, disinterested professional. And I guarantee that that's why you find yourself then getting appointed for a longer term on a voluntary, voted in appointment down the track. I think there's a lot that others could learn from the way you approach it, Reena.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah. I just think it's just easier. I think if you document everything, then later on, like even when we've taken over a building that had 2 different compulsory managers, but unfortunately, again, they didn't document all their decisions, and therefore I've got to rely on the owners to tell me what happened. So it does make it harder in that sense as well when you continue management after compulsory from another manager.
Yeah, something to bear in mind. Well, thank you for sharing that. My next step in this stage of the podcast is usually to invite you to share your win, Reena. That was a good one. Thank you for that share. Have you got more to share with me and what's going right at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think we're talking about professionalism in strata management and fees, and I think people understand that to get better service from your managers, you do need to pay them more money if you're getting the service. So I think that no one's saying that managers should get paid more, but it's got to be value for money. If you want someone professional, obviously you've got to be prepared to pay. And many people just look at, when they're comparing quotes, they just compare the price. They don't look at anything else. They might, because most of the time the terms of the agreements are usually the same, apart from, say, inclusions. And some will say we want, 3 meetings included or whatever. But apart from that, there's really no real comparison between 2 managers. When if you're looking at a contract, for example, like, what are you going to get? They're going to issue your levies. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to hold your AGM. So there's no comparison. So I think this is obviously a discussion that's being now had more prevalently in wider circles. But we had a building that came to us from another one on the Central Coast. They came to us in 2022. We had an interview, and we sent them our proposal, and they said, "Oh, sorry, blah blah," which is fine. I mean, you win some, you lose some. Anyway, and then they wrote back to me just before Christmas saying, "Oh, you may remember me, blah blah. I came and saw you, 2 years ago, et cetera, et cetera." I said, "Oh yeah," because I remembered it was just a unique place. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked out with our manager. We want to come back, and would you reconsider? And I said, well, first of all, I want to know why. What's happening with your current agent, and what are the pain points? Because at the end of the day, I don't like going. Like, to me, there must have been a reason. And of course, as I had presumed when we met recently, that it was to do with the pricing. And they said, "Oh, this other company, came in so cheap," and all the owners thought, "Oh, whatever the manager doesn't do, the committee can do." So I said, "Yeah, well, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys." And so now, and I said, well, obviously our price is much higher now than than it was back then. And so I said, yeah, but as committee members, we don't want to be doing the extra work. And I've said that to people, like, why do you want to be on a Sunday afternoon subsidising the rest of your neighbours and owners, doing the work that everyone else should be contributing to proportionately? So, yeah, so we're going to reset. I said, well, on that basis, the secretary came up with the person to meet with us, and unfortunately the other secretary had passed away in the meantime. So, yeah, and so we thought, okay, on that basis, we'll put out a price, and, if people want service, I'll have to pay for it. So, yeah, and I think sometimes people, learn that the hard way. So, yeah, so that was nice that they came back and wanted us to reconsider taking them on, as in, like, not our pricing, but, would you even consider submitting another proposal? So,
yeah, and the pain that they've gone through in the last 2 years to save a few dollars.
Exactly.
There's an important lesson there. Always better to learn from the mistakes of others than to make them yourself. So listen closely, owners who are looking at new strata management. It's not all about price.
No.
Excellent. Well, my win for this week, we are recording this at a time where I can helpfully share an event that has just happened. A member inside our online membership community has posted in the forum about a big win that they have had in the tribunal just within the last 24 hours. This is a member who has had success in the tribunal before, being represented and having learned a few things, I think, watching the lawyers along the way, has felt confident to take steps themselves to take on a few other issues that are happening in the building. Unfortunately, this one was a bit of a surprise issue. There was a burst pipe that then caused a water leak to this person's property, damaged the flooring. And this owner's corporation, for whatever weird reason, I don't know, they weren't getting the right advice from their strata manager. They just put their head in the sand and just said, no, we're not dealing with it. We're not going to pay to repair your floors. I don't actually think the problem pipe itself has been fixed or properly fixed. So this person, with the confidence of previous tribunal experience and tribunal success, as well as the support that they're getting from us all inside the member forum, proceeded to the tribunal seeking an order that the owners corporation properly repair and maintain the common property and fix the damaged flooring. Owners Corporation turned up to the tribunal with strata manager in tow. I think it was one committee member and the strata manager. By this member's report, got a dressing down from the tribunal member after they tried to raise excuses that this isn't covered by insurance. We don't have any money in the bank. We really just don't want to do it. Tribunal member did not take kindly to that position, especially when the tribunal member heard that the owners corporation had refused to mediate with the owner before the application was filed. Tribunal member sent the parties out to have a discussion in the hope that if they put their heads together and having heard what the tribunal member had said about the owners corporation's position, they might come to a conclusion. And the matter promptly settled with a cash payment being made to this lot owner and permission for the lot owner to get their floors done in the way that they would like to, which this owner was very happy with. Not sure about the further details of that settlement, whether anything else was involved in that, but it was definitely a very happy member who was posting in the forum just overnight, I think it was, letting us all know how that went. So congratulations to that person. I know that you tune in. Well done.
That's great news, Amanda. So this is another example of what I was alluding to earlier in terms of, strata committees really thinking that they have the ability to decide what they should and shouldn't do, when there are certain things you can put off, certain things you need to plan for. But when someone's had their flooring damaged by, a burst pipe, to me, that's just a no-brainer. And raise the money. Like, at the end of the day, and this is the thing I think now with costs rising in strata schemes, mainly because I would say of neglect. If owners have been raising levies every year by 5%, by the time these things happen, you've got a buffer. Unfortunately, at least 5%. Sometimes you need to raise more. But if you think about it, if your income stays the same and your costs are rising, well, it's a no-brainer in terms of what you need to do. And your asset is appreciating. House prices in Sydney are not, they're probably stabilising now by a few percent. But over the last 10 to 15 years, they've doubled in price. So, and unfortunately, people have this mindset that they treat the strata scheme like they treat their own life. And that's the problem, I think, that exists in strata, where people think, well, I haven't got money, so I'm not going to do it. Now, some people might borrow the money in real life. If they haven't got money, they might ask someone for money. They might say, okay, I won't spend money on X so I can spend money on Y because I've got this new bill. Whereas in strata, people just, and especially there are certain types of personalities that take over committees where, they're quite strong. And because people may not agree with that person's view, but because they also don't have money, then it's like, they'll support such an erroneous, flawed way of dealing with an owner who had to go to, even though she's self-represented, Amanda, and didn't pay a lawyer as such, it's still a lot of time.
Oh, absolutely. Day off work, all the preparation.
Yeah, and also, he or she has a job. They probably have to take time off to be at the tribunal. They get behind in their own work. So it's not really right that people have to spend so much personal energy and time for something that's really a no-brainer in this case. We're not talking about, we're talking about water ingress, we're talking about damaged flooring.
And it was great that the tribunal member expressed that view really early and was able to say, look, Owners Corporation, you're looking down the barrel of an order here.
Yeah.
This is not the way to behave. And when I've been involved in cases where the tribunal member has taken that very clear position straight up, I'm so grateful, because it's important for owners corporations, sometimes strata managers, committee members, to hear that. And it's often the thing, and I know in this case, this owner was saying exactly those things for many months before getting to the tribunal. When the tribunal then expresses or confirms that view, and yes, that is the law, and yes, this owner is correct, it can resolve the matter really, really quickly without the need to spend the rest of the day arguing the case. It can often lead to a settlement, which is what happened here. So great result there. And I know that member was very grateful for the support that they'd received in the forum, helping to prepare the case. There was one point made that the tribunal member didn't have copies of any of the material that this owner had filed. The owner had filed it all online. I think the tribunal online system is very unreliable. You've just said, Reena, it happens a lot. That's certainly been my experience. So I always turn up to the tribunal with multiple hard copies of material, just assuming that the member is not going to have everything. I had prepared the owner for that exact experience. And in the post last night, they said, Amanda, that's exactly what happened. Member didn't have anything, but because you gave me that heads up, I was there with copies of the material. So that was not a big deal. So yeah, having to go to all of that preparation, that's stress, and it's a stressful process. Sitting there shouldn't be the case for something as simple as properly repairing the common property.
Yeah. After a burst pipe, I mean, not as if it was her fault. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you, Reena Van Aalst, for joining me for our first chat for 2025. I'll look forward to chatting to you again in a few weeks' time. Build up some wins for me, maybe a challenge or two.
The challenges are coming fast and thick, Amanda, don't worry.
Yeah, we'll work through them. Have a fantastic week in Strata.
You too, Amanda. Bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at yourstrataproperty.com.au.